Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Welcome to 2020, everybody. Hope you had a good New Year. Hope you are having a excellent, as I record this, dread of hopefully not an oncoming war with Iran, but that's how we are starting 2020, which metaphorically is the most excellent example of how this podcast has operated for the past few years, where things are going really great on one side and absolutely about to blow up on the other side. So that's kind of where we're starting this year. So tell you guys a little bit about the last couple of weeks I've had. So New Year's Eve, my fiance and some friends of ours, we went and saw Chris Gethard do a New Year's Eve show. It was a Chris Gethard and Friends show, which was really fun. There was lots of really fun comics on the bill, and Chris Gethard did let's say after hosting and doing some improv bits, he did about a half-hour stand-up to close out the show, which ended at 9:00, and he had this one joke about bread. And I'm not going to say the whole joke here, but it just tickled me to no end. And if I ever see Chris, I'm going to tell him how much I enjoyed that joke. So his new stand-up is really well. It is focused around, and at the core of it is his new child. His child is almost a few months away from being a year old, I guess. But it was a really incredible, inspiring night of comedy. And then I was able to, walking around Long Island City, which I have a lot of history, personal history of my time in New York City, in Long Island City specifically. And I walked by a ice cream shop, a liquid nitrogen ice cream shop, which is now in the space that formerly was the Laughing Devil Comedy Club. And 8 years ago, so this would have been 2011 going to 2012, I was the doorman at the Laughing Devil for 3 sold-out shows that were hosted by Sherry O'Terry from Saturday Night Live, who I don't think these were her absolute first stand-up gigs, but they were early stand-up gigs. And it was a really absolutely bonkers night. Mick Foley, the professional wrestler, came to the early show. All the shows were sold out. I had to kick out several absolute crazed, scary drunk people on each show. And then in between everything that I was experiencing with these big celebrities and this wild audience, I got to see some pretty amazing comics. Carmen Lynch is the main name that I remember because she was so incredibly, incredibly funny. And I got to see her three shows in a row, which was super fun. I got to see Sherry O'Terry get into the groove over the course of the evening, and then when the ball dropped at midnight, it was quite something. And now in 2019, going into 2020, I walked by that place, which is now an ice cream spot, which I'm starting to accept. All of my favorite places that I've performed in New York City eventually are going to become ice cream spots or some variation, because that is just the cycle that we've established for this city. And but it was a really great night. And then 2 days after that, I had my first professional voiceover acting job I got to do, which was really, really exciting and a really great experience. So I'll have more information on that when that project is released. So keep your ears out for that. And now let's get to the show today. This show, my guest on the show is Paul Cohen, who you've heard on the show before with from the sketch group Backdoor BBQ that I work with. Paul and I are the most pop punk kind of members of the sketch group, and lots of people came up to me, and I got lots of messages from people that listened to my first interview with Paul, where they talked about how much it sounded like we were really enjoying talking about the music that we talked about. So in the bustle of the holidays, and to make sure that I had something to share with you guys, I asked Paul, who's on his way over now, he'll be here in like about an hour, if he wanted to come back and we could do like a recap of the pop punk of 2019, and then we'll proceed on into this new year 2020, if our the leaders, if our world leaders will allow the world to continue to exist. That might be my other thing for 2020, because I try not to start trouble on my podcast or in my comedy, and it's maybe I will be make a concerted effort to be a little bit more straightforward in my opinions on things that I like, and maybe on things I don't like. I try to be a pretty positive person, but I don't want that to be construed as I'm uninformed. I, of course, will have a lengthy discussion with you in person. I will not get into arguments on the internet because I got stuff to do, and you should find stuff to do. But to get this started, me and Paul are going to talk about some of our favorite pop punk happenings and bands and songs and albums from 2019. So I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope you have an excellent new year. I hope you are inspired, and whatever you want to create that doesn't exist, I know you're going to do it. So good luck to you. And if you enjoy the show and feel like you know others that might enjoy the show as well, you can go to you can listen to Between Awesome and Disaster wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and you can follow me on Patreon as well, patreon.com/awesomedisaster. So I post exclusive writing and bonus episodes over there. So check that out. Thank you guys again so much for listening. And let's go to my chat with my friend, Paul Cohen. Well, actually what I think most about, and especially when I knew you were coming over again, because I got so many, and I think you told me this too, I got so many compliments from our last episode we did.
Why, thank you. Well, thank you, actually.
not only
50% of the conversation.
That is true, but yeah. I think people especially enjoyed that episode. I got a lot of people saying, you guys sound like you really just love what you're talking about when you guys are talking about music.
Yeah, I'm very, like, everyone knows what I like. Like, I'm such a geek like that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm very specifically always like, I listen to pop punk music.
Yes.
But back when we were growing up, it wasn't that cool. Well, still not cool. But I think there was a time where it's like, oh, pop punk, that's not like real. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
It was like,
it was thought of as children's
before
music.
Bands were getting big, but people were like, oh, that's not real punk. Like, that's not, And I was like, oh, there's a middle ground to me.
Yeah, and I also never cared what real punk was. I just enjoyed what I enjoyed.
Well, my response is always like, oh, but you're like, if you listen to punk, you're always like listening to whatever you want is punk rock.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think.
I just like mine to be a little catchier.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think, and to me, I don't think pop specifically is an evil word, because to me that implies a certain level of knowledge over the craft of songwriting. To me personally, because you know the structures of choruses and verses, bridges, interludes or breakdowns. Like you figured it out. That's an achievement. That's not something to be decried by, because I think lots of hardcore bands just can't fucking play. Like, I know
so
lots
harsh.
of and like lots of hardcore is great, and it's a stylistic choice, but then there's lots that just like you don't know what you're doing at all.
And you know what? If you've ever been to like a wedding or a party with a friend who listens to like punk rock music, and then they start going wild to like I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston, you're like, come on, man, that's just kind of what pop punk is the marriage of. Like, leave it alone.
100%. And like the Ramones are not a heavy band or a hard band. They are a sped up version of like a bubblegum pop band from like the 60s. Like that's how they started. And I love talking about the Ramones, not only because they're a Queens band, and not even from like a sexy part of Queens, from Forest Hills, but they started.
What's the sexy part of Queens? Time out.
Oh, if I had to
I guess like Astoria.
Well, Astoria or Long Island City.
The new kid on the block.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Long Island City has kind of been that way for a little while, because that section around like the Vernon Jackson stop at the 7 is like, the Little Brooklyn, I've heard it called.
Little Brook.
Exactly. but the Ramones are just like they were trying to learn like pop song, like bubblegum pop songs, and then they just sped it up and put distortion on it.
Yeah.
And like the Ramones and the Clash, these are all bands on the Clash like incorporated lots of different styles. And all these bands were on major labels also. So you could just poke holes in anybody's punk argument almost immediately.
And my biggest thing is like, who cares? Like, who cares? I like what I like. It's fun. You know what it is? Most music feels slow to me. And I think that's why I like pop punk a lot. And a lot of music feels like it's missing an energy gear.
I agree.
Pop punk has that too. So like I love pop punk covers because I like those melodies. I like those songs. But they're very slow and they're very, they move it. It's just like this is we'll talk about like the newer Newfound Glory later, but that song King of Wishful Thinking. If you ever listen to the old version, it's like a very slow like do 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 like it's just slow.
It's very
and when
like
you hear the
mid-tempo.
NFV version, you're like, oh, that's how this song should be to me. Obviously not to the songwriters who matter the most, but to me that's how the song should work.
Yeah, well, exactly, because it gives it that kind of energy. And especially when I think about bands that I want to see live, like the first time, and I remember we talked about this a little bit before. The first time I ever saw live music was a local punk rock show. So it was a band called Urban Sombrero, and then there was like a 311 like kind of like rap metal band called Hydrofex that had a saxophone. They were very good, and then a pop punk band called the Flinging Ferrets. And then I think another pop punk band called Corn Dog. Those were like those five bands were the scene when I was in high school in rural Maryland.
So I miss those days.
I miss those too, but
I went to so many stupid local shows and I loved it.
Me too.
And it was almost like there was a genre of music. There were like the bands I listened to that were the radio, and then I had my favorite local bands, and then you had your bands that were even in the area that were close enough that you could kind of see too. That were still as small as like the bands that you would see right in your backyard. Yeah,
exactly. And for me, it was the first time being surrounded by an energetic show. I had never moshed before because, it was the first concert I'd ever been to, but I was just, and then when I got to go to Warped Tour and I'm seeing pits and people are standing, it's something that I want to like repeat and be a part of, because it's so much more entertaining than either going to shows where everyone sits, like Steely Dan, everyone sits at Steely Dan, or when I would go and see like a tour, like say I'm going to see like 4 bands.
Okay.
So, and I'll very specifically, I have one specific memory. I believe the lineup at the 930 Club was Cartel, Gatsby's American Dream, Copeland, and the Starting Line.
That's such a good lineup.
It was a wonderful show.
And that was probably when they were all, and I'm assuming from those bands together, kind of all in their prime.
Yeah, this was Cartel right before Honestly got big on the radio.
But was the album out, or was
the album was
their EP?
The album was out.
Okay, because they had like the Ransom EP or something like that.
Yeah, they had the EP, but this was like Chroma was out, but this is right before like Honestly became big on the radio. So everyone was just like, "Oh, who's this band?" And then everyone heard Honestly. It's like, "Oh, this song is great."
Because I remember like knowing Cartel for a long time before Honestly broke. I forget what website I used to follow, but it was some pop punk website.
Absolute Punk or something like that?
AbsolutePunk.net.
Yeah.
And because they were really high on the Cartel EP, that's how I was like, well, I got to go get like anything they said. I generally tended to follow and like,
Sure.
And they would usually pick a smaller band. Every year or two, they'd pick 1 or 2 albums that they were like, you really gotta check these guys out. So I had loved their EP before, so I got their album right away. I love Chroma. I thought it was so amazing. Good. And how it ends with Q&A is like one of my favorite endings to an album. I think we might have even talked about the Bubble last time we met.
I think we briefly mentioned the Bubble.
Me about it because the artistic promise of Chroma to what is that other album was like 2 different bands almost. But
I agree.
Man, that was good.
Yeah, so they were great. And then Gatsby's American Dream, were very energetic, and they played almost with like no front lights, just like red flashing lights behind them.
Uh-huh.
And they put out a lot of energy, and the starting line put out a lot of energy. This is right before what was the Direction? Was their third album? The one with Island on it.
So it was right before that came out.
Yeah.
Were they playing a lot of that, or still based on a true story?
Still based on true story, and just a couple of new things. So
I guess my favorite starting line album. Go.
I would guess it's Say It Like You Mean It.
It's actually based on a true story.
Really?
Front to back. I actually love that album.
I mean, it is great, but just for me.
But if I go to a live show, I'm like, yo, you better play a lot of Say It Like You Mean It.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't hear Up and Go,
Well,
I'll up and go. No, I won't, but.
Well, they definitely played that because that's one of my favorite songs off that. I also like that like say another word,
Yeah,
and I'll sleep on the. That's one of my favorites still from that. But my point was, while Copeland were great, Copeland are mellow. So they were the mellow band in this like 4-band bill of really like kind of driving rock bands. So while they're good, like a whole evening of songs like that, it sounds sleepy to me.
Yeah, I'm actually okay if you put one of those bands in the middle of a show.
Mm-hmm.
They're opening, closing around with more energetic bands. I think that's cool. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind it, and I don't want to disrespect Copeland because they have great songs. I guess maybe I would have wanted like a 5th band. I don't know because when I saw
who's closing, well, starting line. I guess?
Starting line were headlining.
Okay. Where was Cartel at?
Cartel were first.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because they were just like very, very, very new.
Yeah, because I remember like one really cool show I saw a long time ago. It was. Newfound Glory was the headliner. I remember that. I think early November was right before Newfound Glory, and then I think it was Cartel and Hit the Lights before. So early November, we're kind of like that the change of pace to then go right back up for Newfound Glory.
Yeah, totally. Because early November are not only do they have more ambient sections of their songs, but they also go a little harder sometimes. Like early November they always described me as they always felt like a pop punk band to me that were again just like very like fall in tone.
Yes,
which
is actually ironic because
of their name.
Isn't the name. But I feel like their first EP it was all like leaves and stuff like that too. But yeah,
and then they had the
fall, but kind of like towards the end of fall, going into
December, where it's really cold. I actually, and this will be a great segue. I have, I bought an early November T-shirt with a leaf on it, and it's just, I thought it was such a great shirt.
I think we were at the same show.
That's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to go into because you and I were both at that same Newfound Glory show at the PlayStation Theater. So it was Newfound Glory headlining, and then the early November Real Friends. The early November and Dollskin.
Yeah, I didn't get there for Dollskin. I think I got there for early November.
Dollskin are good. They're more of a rock band, but they're very good.
I remember we talking. I remember like I liked it, but for nostalgia, it wasn't my favorite. But I went out and got their new album after.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I had never heard them live, so it was really cool to. I'm just always happy when they still are. I'm just always happy when bands that I grew up on are still doing stuff. Like they didn't have to get like jobs as retail managers or something.
I think some of them did and then realized they could go make more money going back because they were gone for a while and then they came back.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see early November a lot in Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in Staten Island. I lived in the city for a long time, but I also lived in Hoboken for a bit. And my buddy used to work at Starland Ballroom. So in Staten Island, you really had a real cool advantage of going to Manhattan or Jersey to see shows.
Yeah.
And my buddy working at Starland, we would always go to Starland because, in early November are from Jersey, so their shows would get wild.
Yeah.
Like the crowd
100%.
in New Jersey for them, for me felt different than a crowd for them anywhere else. Because I've seen them in Philly, New York, New Jersey, and New Jersey distinctly feels different.
Yeah, 100%. And especially Starland because that venue is, not only is that venue great, I don't know if you follow them on Twitter, but they're very fun on Twitter.
Oh, really?
They'll respond to you and stuff. It's They're very fun on tour.
I want to ask my buddy. I'm not going to use any names on air, but I'm gonna be like, hey, do any of these people still work at Starland, and are they working the Twitter?
That would be because I would love to know that. I feel the same way. I feel like New Jersey, especially for this style of music that we love so much, is the place to be. Because when I saw, and this is like maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, I saw Newfound Glory headline at Starland, and it was with This Wildlife, a hardcore band, and then maybe State Champs or something like that.
I might have been there for that.
You might have been.
Yeah.
You might have been. But the Jersey crowd for Newfound Glory went the fuck off.
Yeah, I feel like Starland,
went so
those
hard.
crowds go the fuck off for most people
because it's such a great place. Well, they cheer for IHOP they cheer for, and that ad works because I'm like, I want to go IHOP now.
Let's do it.
That's like spiritually. I feel like if I hadn't been born in like bumblefuck Maryland, like I was, I would be like a suburban Jersey kid. That's like who I feel like who I felt like.
I had this talk. So I was at Thanksgiving. We were talking with my parents, and so we grew up in Staten Island, and we were talking about like some of my cousins that lived out there. And there was a time where the house next to them was on sale, I guess, and people were trying to get my parents to move out to the house. Like, it's a great deal. It's New Jersey and everything. And I was like, wow, Mom, my life would have been so much different. I grew up in Jersey. And then I stopped myself. I'm like, nope, I still would have listened to the same music. I would have been in a pop punk. Like, nothing would have changed in my life at all.
Right.
I basically just tried to convert, I don't want to say Jersey to where I grew up, but like the type of bands they listened to, the type of everything they did, I feel like was sort of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you had because California was the big spot, and you had Jersey.
Yeah,
it was like opposite ends of the country.
Yeah, and then there's this scene in like rural small towns in Florida that grew.
Florida had a good
up
scene.
also.
I think Ohio had a good scene.
Yeah, Ohio has all of the cities where and playing into my theory as well. And the Staten Island thing kind of throws a curveball in my overall theory.
It wasn't a huge pop punk scene. We were the outliers.
But I feel
much
like
bigger punk scene there. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like this music kind of thrives in like comfortable suburbia. So like,
yeah,
I remember Billy Joe Armstrong telling a story on stage at the Barclays Center like 3 years ago, where it took them forever to get a gig in actual New York City. Like for years, they couldn't get a gig in like the 5 boroughs. So they would play Long Island, they would play New Jersey, they play upstate.
I have bad news for you, dude. We're headed to those times again. A lot of tours are skipping New York now.
Oh,
PlayStation Theater's done.
PlayStation Theater's done.
Last show is December 31st.
Like it's closed?
It's closed.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not know that. What happened?
Probably it's too expensive to have a venue in Times Square, I assume.
I could see that.
You know what's starting to happen? I missed them the last time, but I'm going to make it a point to make sure I do it the next time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is I perform a lot in a lot of shows. And magically, anytime I want to go see a band, they're like it's always on a random day on like a Thursday when it's like Backdoor show or something.
Sure.
And I actually think I have to miss the next one because I think it's actually Backdoor show again. But a lot of bands are going to Brooklyn now.
Oh yeah.
But they have to be on a smaller level. Like NFG when they were doing their small club tour went there, but I don't think they'll regularly go there. But like you can catch like a Real Friends or like a Grayscale or someone like that there. But I don't think you'll get like a State Champs. They'll do Long Island and Jersey.
Yeah.
So I think we're kind of back to that.
Yeah. I
don't think Terminal 5 books a lot of these type of bands.
No, Terminal 5 is starting to book like who have I seen at Terminal 5 recently? Probably I think the last
Taking Back Sunday plays there a lot, I feel like. No?
Yeah, Taking Back Sunday, Rancid played there. Although Rancid just played the Garden, so I'm curious when Rancid come back where they're going to play. If
I
it's gonna be
can't
Terminal
imagine
5
they can play the Garden every time, right?
Not every time, but I feel like Rancid have been around.
Who was their
for
support?
Well, they were support with the original Misfits reunited. So like
that's why. Yeah.
So Jerry Only and Danzig were like, hey, if we stop being jerks to each other, well, we could make some money.
We can make money.
We can make money. So
if you're just nice to each other.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I don't think if Rancid was going on tour, you'd have to put together like a package.
I think if all right, I'm gonna put together my dream punk arena package right now. Mm-hmm. And this is what I think would fill Barclays Center. It could be multi-generational. I would say I would put Rancid as like one of the headliners. I would then put A Day to Remember, because they're a different sounding kind of band,
I've
and
seen
they're
them
also
at
pretty
Barclays.
big.
They're fun.
Yeah, we were probably at that show too.
Blink-182.
Blink-182, an all-time low. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think of like a newer, like not quite, maybe not like a Real Friends, maybe like a step up from a Real Friends, like an all-time low level.
I'm worried that all those groups though their fan bases are so different. Maybe that's what helps it sells, but
that's what I'm thinking. But I think if you could just get enough people that are cool and like not like gatekeepery, where the bands aren't gatekeepery, it'll bring about all the cool people that would go to that show.
Hey, I'd be into it.
That's my theory. That's my theory, at least, which maybe transitions into our list.
Well, because we were talking about like kind of the year in pop punk. Oh, it sounds awful.
Which I'm very happy to realize that it's all still kind of thriving and happening in the world, even if it's outside of the like popular cultural zeitgeist. There are still people making really interesting,
good music. Yeah,
good pop punk music.
Well, people ask me that. They're like, you still only listen to like that? I'm like, you don't understand. There's new bands coming out constantly that are great. And remember, like, earlier you were like, oh, I saw this band that was like 311. And remember, like, rap metal. And like, there's been a lot of these like music phases that pop punk seemed to fall into, like almost like it would get really big on TRL back in the day for like 6 months or whatever. But the interesting thing, and maybe I could just be wrong because I'm ignorant, and it's probably the same thing people say about pop punk, but I don't think a lot of those are genres that still exist other than a handful of bands. I don't think there's like a wild scene of like, tons of new bands every year coming out that are those type of music. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Not in the way that you described, like the metal scene, at least from my exposure to it, is the metal scene is gearing more towards like more classically influenced stuff, like very heavy stuff, like your more European metal stuff.
Well, but metal's like I think is I would say metal is a main rock genre that probably will always be around in some form. But then you get into sort of the subgenres, because pop punk's kind of a subgenre.
It is, yeah.
But it's a rare
is.
subgenre that kind of flies and keeps thriving.
Yeah,
in a way that it's kind of its own genre at this point. Maybe, I don't know.
I think so, because I feel like for pop punk, and especially, and I think all of the kids who grew up in the suburbs now all live in Brooklyn, so that's why those bands would play there now. So I think there is always going to be a role for a kind of music that is fast, exciting, and makes people think, I could do that. I want to do that.
I think that's a big thing there. Oh, I could do that. That was always the big appeal, and kind of always the joke. It's like, oh, anyone could do this.
Could do this. Well, it's like skiffle.
Easy to learn, hard to master type of thing.
Exactly. It's similar to skiffle, which was a genre of music that was really big when like the Beatles were kids. Okay. And that was like the 3-chord music of their day. So they're like, oh, I could do that. I'll start a band. Yeah. So you need something that makes people think they could start a band, so people will continue starting bands. And I just love that there was so much great music that came out this year, and a lot of our you sent me a list.
We had similarities,
and a lot of our stuff overlapped. I think the best place to start with would be What's on Your Hoodie, and the show we went to, which was Newfound Glories from the Screen to Your Stereo 3 this year, was just amazing. I really, really enjoyed it.
I mean, they're my favorite band, so I'm always biased, but I don't know. I love everything they do,
Yeah, and I love all the original all the songs that they chose to cover. I love all those songs.
You know what? I didn't know the song from Twilight, 1,000 Years. Mm-hmm. And I don't actually love. That's probably my least favorite song by far on the album. But
I'd heard it on the radio. I'd heard that one on the radio, but it took me a while to connect that it was from Twilight.
And when I didn't know what Accidentally in Love. I don't really watch the Shrek movies, so I didn't really know that song. But that's actually one of my favorite songs on the whole album. Mm-hmm. Because I love Counting Crows actually.
Counting Crows are
they're
great.
Actually a fantastic band.
They are.
And I was just like, oh, this is really catchy. But it wasn't like. It's almost like the song feels new to me in a way because I didn't really know the original one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe that's a product of me falling behind in some pop culture things, I would assume.
Yeah, I think that's just.
I'm not a biggest Twilight guy, Will.
That's my thing. Also, is like every time Weird Al puts a new album out, I'm just like, oh, I don't know any of these originals, so I'll have to go listen to them. My favorite from the third from the Screen Your Stereo and was the cover of "This Is Me," because "This Is Me" has those like classic pop punk chords.
I actually picked a different song for our playlist, but it was a toss up. The Greatest Showman was my favorite movie of 2017 or 2017. I think it came out. I believe
sounds
so.
about right.
And I stand by that 100%.
I never saw it, but the trailer makes it look great.
It's so good. It's do you know the story behind it? Because the story behind it's actually very funny.
Yes, I know I know that there's lots of like it's like not exact. It's not historically
It's based on a real
accurate.
person, but the real person was actually like not a good person in real life. So
they Hollywooded it
They
up.
just only took the aspect of that he started these
a circus
shows and then just wiped everything else from the record.
Right,
But
because
it was cool, man. You got Hugh Jackman in there, Zendaya, Zac Efron, Michelle Williams. But he partied, man. It's great.
oh yeah, and
check it out.
I will, because I like that songwriting team also wrote for the Broadway musical Dear Evan Hansen. And I feel like that they might have also written "Let It Go" from Frozen, because they're kind of similar. If you listen to "This Is Me," and then you also listen to "You Will Be Found" from Dear Evan Hansen, they're almost the same song.
Yeah.
Which I don't fault anyone for, because there's a reason those.
I don't fault them, because
There's a reason those chords work.
They're doing something right, man.
That's what I would.
Yeah.
That's
I think,
what I would say.
I think The Greatest Showman was written before Dear Evan Hansen, but then they could actually make and I know Hugh Jackman was like in on the ground level and like really pushed the studio of like, you got to make this movie. You got to make this movie. The movie come out, it didn't do well in its first week, and then it had such good word of mouth. Like I think
it just blew up.
I think it still has like, it still holds some records of like the greatest jump in like week 1 to 2, the greatest jump in week 2 to 3.
Oh
and
wow!
It ended up making like a ton of money at the box office.
I know,
because it was just like people were like, and everything there's like everything is very serious nowadays and like very depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun to just be like, yeah, we get this is make believe, and this person is really not this great guy, but we just want to see this fun movie, and it has like a good moral compass. It's all about like acceptance and everything like that, and because it's about all the oddballs like that he takes under his wing.
Yeah,
and that society is like, you guys are weird.
Mm-hmm. And those are my people.
Yeah,
those are always the people.
Peeps. What up?
Those are always the people I identify with the most.
Although, and even though I said New Found Glory is my favorite band, I love that album. I found this. I'll bring up this topic first.
Okay.
I found it to be hilarious. We both mentioned that we love the album.
Mm-hmm.
We both were at the same show. We obviously both love New Found Glory and the album. So we picked our best cover of 2019. Neither of us picked New Found Glory.
Right.
We both picked covers. Same band, different covers.
songs.
Yeah.
Yes, and for anyone listening, here's the thing: neither Paul and I do not plan to be at the same show all the time. We just are.
Yeah. You're just like, oh, cool.
So yeah, so favorite pop punk cover of the year. Both were done for us, for me and Paul. Both were done by the band MXPX.
Who's kind of having like a renaissance now. They had a really good album last year.
They did.
They've been putting out a lot of these covers, and they're both covers of pop punk bands. Yeah.
Yes. So you picked San Dimas High School Football Rules, which is a classic song by the Ataris.
I just love that song so much.
It's a spectacular song.
But I actually love the other one too.
Oh, the one I picked?
In fact, that whole album is great. The one the cover is from.
Oh, yeah.
The War on Errorism, the NoFX album.
Yes. So I picked MXPX's cover of Franco and American, and I think what got me was that, wow, this really translates.
Well,
still,
because they updated the lyrics.
They updated the lyrics. I also love that they added like ska horns instead of doing like the little keyboard.
Yeah, I think
thing.
they've been working with Five Iron Frenzy a lot because they tour with them and they'll play on some of their songs live. So they have this really cool. Hold on, I'm gonna go on a little tangent. Is that cool?
Oh, 100%. And
Cool.
the other thing I love is while you're looking that up is that they personalized both of their covers. Like they plugged Chris Rowe
Yeah, there's one line like I'll even get like Chris Rowe to song right
to dedicate a song to
and
you.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Mike Herrera, good job, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
love
And the updates they made to Franco and American,
too
like
many to mention,
like
but,
mentioning Joe Rogan, like
Yeah.
all the hot button political issues like kids in cages, New Orleans, everything. And I really related to the line, I want to go east and eat with Japanese again, or climb the wall and hang out with Mexicans, because those are both two of my exit plans. Japan is my number one.
I know. Well, we'll get to more of that later.
Yes, we will.
But yeah. So you download this. It's MXPX. It's Heard That Sound. It's like a live recorded cover.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the horn section from 5 Iron Frenzy.
Oh, really?
Like it kicks in when the band kicks in. It's awesome.
Oh, that's so cool. 5 Iron Frenzy, another legends of the like Christian alternative music scene. I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds excellent.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because I have not. I'm not religious, and I don't really love overly religious things. But I've been, like, I remember being like 15 and like giving like my Hanukkah list right to my parents, and it did include things like, oh, I really want this album, like Slowly Going Away of the Buffalo by MXPX. You know.
Classic. Doing Time will probably still always be my all-time favorite MXPX song. But they just have so many classics. I learned like my first like intricate bass line was Chick Magnet.
Oh yeah, I think that might have been a lot of people's.
I think so. It was like that and Carousel by Blink. Those were like the hard bass lines.
Carousel's hard, actually.
Yeah, it took me a while to learn it, but it was very satisfying when I did. Like anytime when I'm playing bass and I can use the D and G strings, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm showing some range here. One band
two least ones,
one band I would love to ask you, because it comes up in your favorite songs and your favorite album of 2019 list. I've only read about this band because from a marketing and branding standpoint, because apparently their merchandise game is like really solid. Like their merch doesn't look like typical band merch. It almost looks like a clothing brand that you've never heard of.
Which is smart.
Yeah. And especially for like, your more mature, like older audiences who don't want. So tell me about Grayscale.
Yeah. So I was introduced this band by my friend Gino Kent. I remember it vividly because we were in Austin for a bachelor party and we were talking about NFG's new album, Makes Me Sick. And he wasn't a big fan, and he said something to the point where like, oh, you know what, like for as good as band NFG is, they should have put out the best album this year, not Grayscale. And I was like, who's Grayscale? Like, put this band on. So we put on their first album. I saw you the next week after. We had tech for a show.
Yes.
And I run up to the booth. I'm like, oh, put on this song. I forget, like it was like Most Beautiful Things. I'm like, put on this song. I just found this new band. They're called Grayscale. We ended up listening to the album in the Pit Underground. And I loved them. So I've been like kind of it's one of those things where I always wait for their stuff to come out. But it's such a good album. And there are some songs that are more pop punky. There's some songs that are more just intricate and cool. But I love it, man. When I recommend anyone go check it out. Like the second I heard the first song on it, I was just like, whoa. Like when I actually, because a lot of times nowadays when so many bands release so many singles before the album comes out, it feels weird to listen to an album. Like nothing ever feels like an A to Z album. They feel like 12 songs that are just put out in random order. But it was one of those albums, like I remember getting it and I had heard some of the songs before, but it was one of those songs where I could put my headphones on, blink, and 45 minutes later I'm like, oh my gosh, I just went through the whole album.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And there's like
Nella Vita.
Nella Vita. I'm gonna download it tonight. So and that sense of anticipation, because how often are you like anxious for an album to come out? It happens to me very, very rarely in my 30s now. But in
our old age.
Wait, oh, dude, by pop punk years, we're like senior citizens, I think.
I know. I'm 85 in pop punk years. And still going.
Yes, I will never stop defending pop punk. But Man Overboard.
Well, talk about a band that got by on merchandise branding.
Yeah, exactly. Those shirts were everywhere.
Shirts were
everywhere. And it happened to me 3 times this year where I was like, eager and so excited for a new album to come out. The first one I would love to talk about, and this is getting a little bit into the Japanese thing, because if you, dear listener, are not aware, Japan's alternative music scene has some stellar bands in it, and my favorite, and I've become like an evangelist for this band a little bit because I talk about them constantly, and I think I've told you like 4 or 5 times, oh, I just got this great new band. My favorite album of the year was by a band called The Winking Owl, who are from Tokyo, and their newest album, Thank You Love Letter. I had become a fan of their older albums earlier this year, just randomly coming across them on YouTube, and was just instantly captured. Like something about their melodies and the way she sings, even if I can only understand the English words, just really grabbed my heart, dude.
Yeah.
And
we have a lot of female-led bands on our lists.
Yes, yeah. There are lots of female, and I love when women front rock bands or are in rock bands. Because I feel like, at least in American pop culture, you get lots of female pop singers, you get lots of singer-songwriters. You do not get a lot of women that are in bands.
Yeah, and let's be clear here too. If there ever was a genre that just flies so well, it's pop punk. Because the old adage was pop punk was always whiny boys,
right? Singing
to sound like girls,
singing songs about girls.
Yeah.
And I like when girls flip the script.
And they're singing about boys, and we're like, yeah, about time. We should have 50-50.
Yeah,
but it's still not that at all. But
but
there's some awesome bands.
It's getting better. And The Winking Owl, I put in that category. I'll specifically say their songs, the song "Try" and the song "New" from Thank You Love Letter are a great introduction to The Winking Owl. If you like Paramore, this is Paramore taken up a couple notches.
Like Paramore with more energy.
Yes,
or maybe early Paramore,
and
like Riot's Paramore, maybe.
Yeah, like less poppy, more focused on like interesting lead guitar.
Awesome.
The music is great. It's like really energetic. Doesn't ever really slow down except for like the more like electronic based songs. And their guitarist is incredible.
Awesome.
Like I love their guitarist.
Like it definitely. I will say this. I probably wouldn't put it on my high favorites list just because it's great mood music for me.
Mm-hmm.
But after a bit, I'm like, oh, is this what people feel like when they listen to like? Because the whole I always feel like American stuff's everywhere, and I'm like, why? If these people don't speak English, like, how could stuff be that big there? But I think that's like, oh, maybe that's just how I feel, because the songs are fantastic though.
Yeah,
like their energy, like talk about energy, pops off like your ears. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Like you can feel it even if you're just sitting in your apartment listening. Yeah. Talking about energetic bands that are female led and not from America. Another one of our new favorites. Another country that's doing excellent pop punk is Australia. And if you are not listening to the band Stand Atlantic, if you love pop punk, you need to get your life right.
So
I love every song that I love.
Well, we didn't really include it in our list because I feel like I discovered this album, and I think you did, in 2019, but it's from 2018. Skinny Dipping.
Yes.
That album front to back is like a lesson in pop punk for other bands.
100%. It is killer songs, and you're done in half an hour. Yeah, and it came out in 28, just before 2019.
Yeah. And their new single is, yeah, because if you like, sometimes bands put out that really awesome first album, and then they're like, you know what, the best way to capitalize on this, change our style. No, like Stand Atlantic is like, we're gonna just do it, but do it even better now.
Yes, and I think the single, which from what I guess will be album number 2 that they're working on right now, because I follow them all on Twitter. The song is called "Hate Me Sometimes," and it to me reminds me of like the classic pop punk of the early 2000s, like that guitar riff. It just makes you want to bounce.
Yeah, I'm like thinking of, you can't see us right now.
Yeah, but me and
Will
Paul
I,
are like
we're bouncing.
We're bouncing up and down,
Yeah.
picturing the song in our heads.
It's so
we will have
good.
all this in a playlist for you guys, because I don't want to get dinged by copyright, but we'll have all this in a Spotify
Well, all we're
playlist
doing
in
is
the
we're
description.
encouraging you to listen to bands after. We're just not going to play them for copyright reasons. But
100%.
Yeah,
Another great Australian pop punk band is a band called Yours Truly. Have you heard of them?
so I downloaded it because they were the other female-led band.
Mm-hmm.
They're awesome, but I didn't really know them until you gave me the playlist. I guess they just have that new EP out now.
Yeah, I had listened to their single and really enjoyed their first single, and then I saw that this EP came out, and I heard this new song and was like, "Oh, this is from the 2019, so it can go on the list."
I was excited to ask you about it because I want to be like, where are they from? How'd you find out about them? So I'm like, oh, they're Australian too.
They're Australian, and YouTube. You know, you go down enough of a wormhole, and
Is this the
you'll
new
find
version
stuff.
of like how we talked about looking at the albums to find out the thank yous, and then you buy the albums?
It is the
That's
for
the
me.
new
It's
thing,
the
is just
internet
searching
way
the
of doing
internet.
it.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's good because that's a fun way to do. I think that's how I find bands actually. It's probably the same way, or like sometimes like I found this one. How I found Stand Atlantic, because we both knew them and talked about it later, was there was like a playlist called like Rise and Grind or something on iTunes, and it was just like 40 songs that included stuff like Blink-182 on it, but it also had so many other these bands like a Stand Atlantic on it, and I was like, I'm just gonna listen to this playlist and find the bands, because you could tell they were gonna be all sorts of alternative kind of rock that it fits into.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just gonna go through these and just start downloading all the albums of the bands that I like off this thing.
That's basically what I do. I also found like when I'm on like long car trips with my fiance, she'll put on like a Pandora station, and it starts with Blink or
yeah, and then it starts going to other.
And then I found lots of great new stuff that way. One of my and then this might be an interesting segue. So talking about Blink, this was in our category of albums by pop punk royalty.
I named it. I'm sure you'll get some comments like, "Stop, Paul."
I'd never want you to stop, Paul. But 9 by Blink-182 came out this year, which people kept calling it their 8th album, but it's not.
9.
They're
It's
not, because they're not counting. Because they're not counting Buddha.
Why not?
The Blink is counting Buddha.
But why aren't other people counting Buddha?
I don't know. Probably because they haven't heard of it, or I think maybe it was technically a demo, but
No,
Blink
I
counted.
buying it. You know, when you found that band you're absolutely obsessed with, and you're like, I'm gonna go back and buy all their old stuff. Buddha was in all the stores.
Yeah, that's what I think I ordered Buddha online, but yeah, I had to have it too.
So most people start with Cheshire Cat, I guess.
I guess I think that was what I think. Maybe that's considered the official start, and then they call. But you have to.
I'm also
going to
go with 2 things. 1, Blink-182 considers it, and 3 or 2. Wait, 1? I don't know. Whatever. Can't count. But it's called 9. The album is called 9.
So it's clearly would be what they consider their 9th album, and I think.
Did I just say 2 points and go 2, 3?
You did, but
Okay.
it was funny, so I didn't feel the need to correct you, and I think this album had some really great songs on it. The first time I listened to it, "Pin the Grenade," the chorus of "Pin the Grenade,"
that's I think my favorite song
caught
on the
me
album.
instantly.
Yeah.
I also like On Some Emo Shit because I just love the very New York centric lyrics, like referencing like bodegas and art galleries in Brooklyn. That made me feel
Love
warm and
bodegas.
fuzzy.
I loved Blame It on Our Youth, if I got that right.
Oh yeah, blame it on my youth. And
I
then-
like that because it kind of reminds me of. So this album, to me, feels the most like maybe self-titled to them.
Yeah, I think it is the spiritual successor to the Untitled
Yeah.
album.
So like, because it is a little. So I like it, don't love it, and we talked about before. Because I feel like it has great moments on it, but there are some times where I'm like, oh, okay, and then there are other times where I'm like Pin the Grenade, you're like, oh, this is a great song, you know.
Oh yeah, the thing I enjoyed about it the most was, and this is a compliment I will say to them as a whole, is that they are both not forgetting who they are, but also they're not afraid of new things.
No,
Like
not.
because this also incorporates lots of modern, what I would call modern production techniques, and it's very much the band that they would be in 2019.
Yeah, I feel like they've been that way for a long time because, I mean, Enema was definitely, if you go back and listen, Enema was very different than Dude Ranch.
Oh yeah,
Very
like
different.
multiple tracks of guitar,
Yeah,
lot of changes from Dude Ranch to Enema.
Take Off Your Pants and Jacket kind of feels like a sequel to Enema.
Yeah.
But other than that, really, their albums have been changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that one blip, but it was their most popular blip that everyone's like, well, they're just doing the same thing, and they,
Exactly.
And then really haven't.
And then I think a lot of their contemporaries tried to copy the changes they did with the Untitled album,
which are very hard to copy.
Yeah, because they're so drastically unique of that time and of that creation of those songs.
Yeah. It's a great album. It is weird.
It's very
great
weird
album.
And I think it stands the test of time. So the fact that they're trying to harken back to that while also embracing some new stuff, I don't hate either. And the fact that I think Travis Barker played on Lil Nas X's EP, which
Travis is everywhere.
Which the singles, which a friend of mine told me this, and I listened to some of it. The singles from that EP, a lot of it is very pop punk influenced. It does not feel like rap.
Oh, yeah, I haven't gone back and listened.
Which is really interesting to me. I love that. I love the crossover on both sides. Like I love that hip hop guys love Travis, and I love that hip hop guys love Blink. I think it's really excellent.
I think Blink is a band that's universally loved. I feel like if you love pop punk, they're like I said, royalty or like legends of pop punk. But I also feel like it's a band that people are like, oh, I love Blink, and not like in a ironic way, or not like I only know all the small things. They're like, oh, I like this band.
Yeah, because the people, I either get that reaction, or if I tell people Blink's my favorite band, they're like, still? I think I said that last time.
Okay, Mom.
And I'm like, yes, I genuinely love them. And it's crazy that I've been listening to this band for almost 20 years of my life.
What's crazy about this now, dude, is we've crossed over parts of our lives where we've been listening to this music and these bands like more than 50% of our life.
I know.
And you don't really remember the first 2-3 years of your life, really. I don't think so.
Yeah, I got Enema of the State when I was 13. I'm 33 now, turning 34. This is like 2/3 of my life is Blink-182 that I've continued to grow with them and been interested in what they're doing, which is amazing. Another thing I would love to talk about, and not just because their singer and guitarist did my show last year, Alistair. If for those of you who don't remember, Alistair were on a very influential pop punk record label called Drive Thru Records, but they put out a best of early last year called 20 Years and Counting that had a bunch of new songs and new versions of their old stuff. And I really like the new stuff on that album too.
Yeah, and actually, I want to talk about that, and then I want to talk about, because there were 3 albums this year that kind of did similar things, but to different results. So anyway, Alistair holds like a soft spot in my heart because they were. I feel like I've been listening to Alistair before, since they had Dead Ends and Girlfriends, was it?
Yeah, Dead Ends and Girlfriends.
I feel like. So I've been listening to Alistair. Oh God, I must have been 14 or something when I started listening to them, and I loved Alistair, and I've seen them live many a times. If you ever met them you've actually met them, but if you ever met them after shows or anything, they were always cool guys.
Oh, super cool.
And even though Drive Thru was really blowing up, but they kind of seemed like, oh, this is us, this is what we do, and. I always loved them. So when this came out, I liked it because I felt like it improved on some of the songs and the quality.
I think
they did make changes to it. But why I wanted is because there were 3 albums this year that kind of felt this way to me. So the Alistair one I gave a really high grade to.
Is same here. Yeah. And dude, when they tour the East Coast, if they tour the East Coast again,
going.
we're going.
Oh, we're going. The next one was really cool. There was an album called Hang Your Head in Hope. But it was just basically Chris Rowe of the Ataris doing acoustic sessions with a lot of old Atari songs on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is also really good because it's like a little different take on it.
Oh, cool. I'm going to have to listen. Does he do like all his stuff on Bandcamp now?
Probably.
Because, because I've been waiting for Graveyards of the Atlantic for what I feel like is forever. So Hang Your Head in Hope, I will have to definitely check
it's
out.
cool. It's an acoustic album, but
awesome.
That's kind of like his bread and butter to me too.
Yeah.
But there was one album that didn't sit that well with me.
And which one was that?
All Time Low. So Nothing Personal is probably, I don't know. I love All Time Low. I love especially that album and the one right before it.
So Wrong It's Right.
Yeah. But this album was like a 10-year album, but all they did was record it live, not live in front of an audience, like live in a studio, which tells me then they could sort of do retakes of it. But it was just like the four of them doing the album in a studio live, like not to an audience. That felt a little lazy to me.
Oh, you know what I would have been interesting for them to do? I would have liked to have heard what Yellowcard did, do an acoustic version of it.
Yeah, that would have been cool because Yellowcard did that at least twice, right?
Yeah, Yellowcard did an acoustic version of Ocean Avenue, and then I saw them live.
Before that, they did a different one.
Yes.
I'm just drawing a blank on the name of the album.
The album is called When You're Through Thinking, Say Yes.
Yes.
They did an acoustic version of that album also, yes.
I like how I felt the need to jump in as you were finishing it.
Well, it's like, aha.
I was like, I got it
also.
Which was a really cool acoustic album, but the All Time Low felt lazy to me, while, I mean, Alistair, even though it was still studio recorded, felt kind of fresher.
Well, yeah.
Especially because some of their early recordings were not that great.
Yeah, like Dead Ends and Girlfriends was recorded for $700.
I gotta give them credit for, because I always loved the song growing up, but I could see it not being very PC today. I give them credit for still doing Jacob Thinks I'm Gay.
Uh-huh.
And because if you're able to listen to that album, I love that album. I think they did Moper also.
Yeah, Moper is...
No, I love Moper.
I had such a different and I talked to Tim about this. I had a very different reaction listening to that song now that I'm older. Like it felt much more emotional to me, but in a different way.
Yeah, and also much better quality.
Yeah, like the old stuff, because they had the rights to the songs but not the recordings. Yeah. So they had to re-record the old stuff.
Cool. I mean, there's definitely like a story behind it, but even if there wasn't, because somewhere down in Fullerton they kind of changed a bit. It was cooler. Didn't they?
Well, they had they added a slower. They did a version of the chorus where it's slower,
did it, right?
And Scotty sings it.
And I think that's how they did it live. I think too. I could be making that up.
I haven't. Man, the last time I saw Alistair live was when they were on tour. They were opening for Mest's farewell tour.
Oh, I think I was there for that.
Yeah,
I saw one of many Mest farewell tours. Who's now touring again?
Yeah,
I would die to see Mest though. Still,
I would see that. I would love to talk to Tony Lovato, because I feel like he's a guy. His life experience has. I feel like is. There's a lot to be gleaned from the life he's led.
Yeah, Tony, if you're out there, we want to chat.
Yeah, Tony.
I'll be in on that, maybe.
Yeah, Tony Lovato, if you're listening to this, lots of your friends would say I'm a good interviewer, so please reach out to me at Comic Will Carry on Twitter.
Their new album's coming out soon because they've already released half the song, so you should check it out.
Oh, awesome! I will definitely do that then. So this might be another way to kind of round this out. Kind of looking forward. There's a couple things I want to cover before we get out here, Paul. First off, I'll say real quickly, if you haven't listened to Hello Exile by the Menzingers, that's a great album that came out this past year. I call it punk for
adults.
For adults. People have been beat up a little bit by life, but there's a couple things I want to cover. The first one being My Chemical Romance's reunion.
Well, you're.
I'm wearing the shirt. I'm wearing the Black Parade T-shirt. And the night of their reunion show in Los Angeles, I stayed up all night furiously searching YouTube for clips, and they sound great. I think they still sound great. They're tuning down. They're tuning down. Like, I don't know if your band did this, but did you play in standard or E flat?
Mostly standard, but I think there was a period. So if you go to E flat, it's actually a lot easier on the singer. Yeah,
so they're doing that for Gerard, but Gerard still is hitting all the notes and still sounds like himself.
So I know a lot of bands. We did that. I think we had at least one. I know we had at least one kind of EP where we did that,
Mm-hmm.
and it definitely helps for vocal. I don't know if it's just that one half step, but because pop punk tends to sing high,
Right.
it makes a difference. Like,
Yeah,
and
'cause
otherwise you don't really tell.
yeah, exactly. And then as you get older, your range decreases.
My
so.
range gets better with age. No, it doesn't.
Oh, lucky you! I'm just lucky. I describe myself as I can hit 3 notes. I feel like I can do I'm a Mark Hoppus kind of vocalist. Like he has a better range, I think, but that's kind of how my singing style is.
Okay, I can carry a tune. Like I could stay in pitch well, but I'm probably not a good singer. I'm not a bad singer, but I'm not a good singer.
Yeah, I will say I'm a good.
I sing live all the time.
Yeah, I will say I'm a singer. I'm not a vocalist.
I am
if
definitely
that
not
makes
a
sense.
vocalist, so I'm with you on that.
Yeah, like vocalists are like people you see on stage at the at Carnegie Hall.
Are My Chemical Romance going to tour? I saw them like when I was in college, before they were big, like on their first album, and they played in like a basement in front of 20 people.
Oh, that
and I
would have
thought
been
it was
awesome.
cool, like later in life, because then they blew up and were like everywhere.
I saw them on each of their tours. I saw them on Warped Tour when they were doing my 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge. I saw the Black Parade tour, and then I saw the Honda Civic tour with Blink and Alkaline Trio. So I would love to see them again. I've heard rumors of like more extensive U.S. touring. The only shows announced right now, there was the L.A. show. They're playing a couple. They're playing and then they're playing some festivals.
So
in
this
Japan,
is how it starts, man.
Australia, and New Zealand.
This is how it starts. They're gonna do festivals first, and then when that season dries up, they're gonna do a full tour. I bet you right now, we're gonna listen to this in 2020. If we hopefully do this again, if people like it, if not, we'll still do it.
Well, Paul, I think this might be the tradition every year now. This might be like, how like Andy Kindler always comes on WTF at every like big milestone. I feel like every like new year,
or like on How Did This Get Made? Whenever there's a new Fast and Furious, Adam Scott comes on.
Exactly. I feel like every new year in January, you need to come on and we need to talk about our favorite music.
I want to give one shout out to a band because they were kind of my runner up for album of the year.
Okay.
If you've never checked out Step on It, phenomenal.
Okay. I'm gonna.
Phenomenal.
I'm gonna.
So I gave Grayscale all the love, but
where are Step on It from? Are they from the U.S.?
I didn't do that good research, man.
Oh, it's okay.
Funny because I totally expected you to know everything about the bands, and then I was like, oh, I don't. I just like them if they sound fun.
Excellent. So it's the album After Tonight.
Yeah, that album's great.
Okay.
And their album before is pretty good too, but it's definitely like one of those great step up. I have a feeling like some of those bands like that we talked about, like A Stand Atlantic and Grayscale and Step on It. I could see them like these bands starting to have kind of nice breakouts soon. And when I say breakouts, I'm saying like in pop punk's world now, where they just start being able to headline their own tours that are in bigger venues, because like these bands will go out and headline tours now, a lot of them, but they're in very, very small venues.
Got it. Yeah they're still in that like once all these bands get up to like the 1,200 like 2,000 capacity, that's when I feel like good for them, they've kind of arrived. And then the one other song I want to make sure we mention before we get out here, a collaboration between the new school and the old school.
I think they're both old school, if I'm thinking of the right song.
Maybe they are. I'm thinking of We Belong by Simple Plan, and We the Kings?
Yeah, because We the Kings have been out for a while. They were around when I was younger.
Are We the Kings the Check Yes Juliet band?
I think so.
Okay, then I will say a Titanic collaboration of two mid 2000s.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I just
stalwarts.
I feel like I've known them for a long time.
Well, I guess I missed them when they were big. Like I found Check Yes Juliet later, and then I saw.
Okay, yes, that makes sense.
And then I saw the mashup of Check Yes Juliet and Dear Maria.
All right, so I just looked it up. Wait, actually finished your thoughts on Simple Plan.
I think that song's great because Simple Plan kind of lost me when they went a little too poppy. Because and then there was that one song that was very like acoustic and summery, but like Jet Lag is my favorite song by theirs. Okay. I think Jet Lag is a great song.
I saw them. They were at Warped Tour this year, I saw
Yeah.
them in Atlantic City. They were fantastic. I missed their show with State Champs this year. I had a lot of run-ins with State Champs this year.
Uh-huh.
I missed their Simple Plan show. I had tickets to their Blink-182 and State Champs' opener show in AC. They had to cancel because of Travis. But then I finally got to see State Champs at PlayStation Theater. But anyway, I looked it up. Grayscale is in Brooklyn, February 25th. I don't. If you don't know these bands, they're actually also cool bands. But opening for them is Hot Mulligan and Waster, just WSTR.
I know Hot Mulligan. They're great.
Yeah, and you probably love Waster then. They're from England.
Oh, awesome.
A lot of England always has good pop punk bands.
Yes, like
I feel like next year,
Neck Deep, Moose Blood.
She's a God. I think we had that on. Moose
Yeah,
Blood.
yeah. She's a God's a great song. That album will be great. Yeah, there's just there continues to be really exciting stuff. You got to look for it, but you should not. You should stave off the tendency to become crotchety and say that music was better back when you were a teenager, because it's still out there. You just got to get excited to find it.
So you know what I think? I think I was better when I was a teenager, so I remember music fondly. But I'm like, no, these bands are awesome.
Yeah, I just like that.
Life was more exciting, I think, in a way. Back, my theory is that life it feels like it moves quicker when you get older because you're having less new experiences.
Yes.
New experiences, when you do them, feel like an hour could feel like a day.
Mhm.
Where now I'm like, oh, my week, I have very few new experiences. It's the same thing.
Mhm.
So there always is that nostalgia for that age.
Yeah.
It's the age of most change in your life. So you do look at music very fondly in that time. But to
Mhm.
be like there are not good music coming out is so stupid.
I agree. And metal, I think, has this problem more so than pop punk does. I feel like pop punk, specifically that subgenre, very open. Like that's like the scene.
Yeah.
But I think about how jazz was the cultural dominating form of music for a good chunk of the 1900s, and now jazz is a very niche thing enjoyed by very comparatively fewer people. So, and I read some articles. I think a part of that is that people who are in the jazz got kind of elitist.
Well, you know how earlier you said like, oh wait, I don't know if we were recording for this part, but we talked about how like an appeal of some of these bands are you feel like you can go start one yourself.
Yes.
I think it's harder with jazz bands. I mean, maybe you could join like your school's jazz band when you're a teenager, but it's hard to get a bunch of buddies together and be like, we're just gonna.
Right. Yeah. It's probably harder to find people that can like, start, okay, we're going to play in the key of C at this tempo, and then you could just go and improvise. Yeah. But you could get some people together and be like, okay, the chords are A, D, and E. And then, or my other favorite pop punk chord progression is A, F sharp, D, E.
Is any of those the ones from Damn It?
Damn It is C, G, A, F.
Okay. Well, I was working with my buddy, and we never really went through it. I think we might even talk to you about it, or maybe even
we might
I
have.
don't remember, but it was like doing an improvised pop punk show, and it was just you had like 3 chord progressions, so you knew where to go with everything. But
yeah.
No, I never minded. Like I when I was in a band, we'd always have like kind of code words that to us made perfect sense, but it was just like, yeah, we'll do like the Damn It chord progression, but like hold on to the second note for the break. We're gonna do the jump beat in the chorus, the punk beat for the verse, and we'll have the breakdown beat in the,
yeah.
It's hard for me to verbalize it, but in our minds, like
I hear the song in my
page, and we're like, all right, we know what we're doing. Okay, cool.
I hear the song in my head perfectly. It just matters what chord are we starting on, because the Damn It chord progression is also the hit or miss chord progression.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know as soon as I know where we're starting, we're gonna write a great song. Paul,
can't go wrong.
Absolutely, Paul. A joy as always to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you guys check out some of this music. Like I have no investment in it all other than I want people to listen to these bands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will have either YouTube playlist, Spotify playlist, some kind of playlist in the description, so you can go to listen to some of this stuff. As I'm sure you can hear, me and Paul love what we're talking about. So if we endorse something, we really think you'll like it too. So I hope you guys check out some of the stuff we talked about. And when's the next Backdoor BBQ show?
February 27th.
February 27th.
Well, I was just really excited because I looked up and I thought it was the day of a show I want to go to, but they're actually not on the same day, so I could do both.
Well, perfect. Awesome, man. Thank you so. What's the show?
That Grayscale show in Brooklyn.
Oh, perfect. Excellent, man. Thank you so much.
As always, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, that's the end of our first show of 2020. Thank you so much for listening. If you were interested in checking out any of the bands that we mentioned, I will have a Spotify or a YouTube playlist in the description that kind of has some of the songs we were talking about. I hope you guys enjoy that and check that out. Thank you, Paul. As always, I love getting to talk music with you. I appreciate you coming over. And if any of the bands that we mentioned want to be on the show, I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carry. I would love to chat with any of you. So thank you guys for being here and for being here through if you've been here from when I began this show in 2016, or if you are just here for the first time now, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to check out some of the Patreon exclusive writing and bonus episodes that I have available, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. I do my best to create a lot of unique, original and stuff that I only put on that platform for those who contribute over there. So thank you guys so much for checking that out. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carry. If you know a show, someone or a friend who might enjoy this show, please feel free to let them know. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you leave a review on iTunes, that helps other people find the show organically. And you can also listen to us on Stitcher and Spotify. And thank you guys very much for being here. And I hope you have a great new year. I hope you have a clear head and are focused. I'm going to try to be the same, and I'm going to hopefully big things will happen this year if the world stays around to let us continue living in it. So thank you guys for being here, and I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.